I never thought a desk could feel like a prison. But here I was sitting at my new workstation in Eugene, Oregon, staring at the monitor while trying to ignore the guy next to me. His name? Evan. And from day one, he made it clear that boundaries were not part of his vocabulary. Evan wasn't just any coworker, he was that coworker. You know the type. Overly friendly, always eager to share stories about their life, and somehow convinced they're everyone's best friend whether you asked for it or not. At first glance he seemed harmless. A tall guy with an easy smile who wore Hawaiian shirts even though it was still chilly outside. But within hours of meeting him, I realized there was something off about his charm. Felt calculated. It started small. Too small to complain about, really. He'd ask questions during breaks, things like, "So Lila, what do you do on weekends?" Or, "Are you seeing anyone special?" The kind of nosy comments that would normally slide under my radar if they came from someone else. But Evan didn't stop after getting polite non-answers. Instead he kept digging, probing deeper each time until I felt cornered. Like a moth drawn to light, but instead of warmth all I got was irritation. The tipping point came when he borrowed my pen without asking. A pen. Not exactly a rare commodity in an office full of supplies. When I reached for it later it was gone. Then when I finally spotted it on his desk, he acted as though nothing had happened. "Oh, sorry," he said casually, tossing it back to me like it was no big deal. Except it was a big deal to me. That pen was mine. My space. My rules. And yet, here he was, stepping over invisible lines without a second thought. I tried brushing it off. After all, this wasn't high school. We weren't kids fighting over toys. But every little thing added up. The way he leaned into my side of the desk whenever he spoke, how he interrupted my focus with endless chatter, and worst of all, how he assumed I owed him some sort of friendship simply because we shared oxygen in the same room. By lunchtime I was ready to scream. Or maybe cry. Probably both. So imagine my reaction when he popped the ultimate question. "Hey Lila, wanna grab lunch with us today? Just a few of us from IT. Nothing fancy." His tone was casual, almost playful, but his eyes lingered expectantly, waiting for my answer. Part of me wanted to say yes, just to avoid being rude, but another part recoiled at the thought of spending more time with him outside of work. What would happen then? Would he interrogate me further? Share more unsolicited details about his failed marriage? I couldn't handle that. Not now. Not ever. "No thanks," I replied curtly, forcing a tight smile. "I've got too much on my plate." He tilted his head, feigning disappointment. "Ah, come on. Work can wait, right?" Work could wait, sure. But my sanity couldn't. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about skipping lunch. It was about setting a precedent. If I gave in now, where would it end? That night, as I drove home through the rain-soaked streets of Eugene, I replayed our interactions in my mind. Was I overreacting? Maybe. But something about Evan rubbed me the wrong way, like sandpaper against raw skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, and whatever storm was brewing, I wasn't prepared for it. The next morning I walked into the office with a newfound resolve. This ends now, I told myself. If Evan wanted to play his little games, I'd make sure he knew exactly where the line was. Except lines weren't something Evan seemed to understand. He greeted me cheerfully, too cheerfully, as if yesterday's awkward lunch invitation had never happened. "Morning, Lila," he said, leaning slightly toward my desk. His energy was overwhelming, like a spotlight trained directly on me, while I desperately tried to blend into the shadows. "Morning," I muttered, keeping my eyes glued to my computer screen. I hoped that ignoring him would send a clear message. I'm not interested in your antics. But Evan didn't take hints well or at all. He launched into another monologue about his ex-wife, detailing how she supposedly sabotaged their finances and ruined his trust in relationships. The story dragged on for what felt like hours, each word dripping with self-pity and thinly veiled manipulation. At first I tuned him out, focusing instead on debugging code. But then halfway through his rant he dropped a bombshell. "You know, Lila, you remind me of her sometimes. Quiet, focused but distant." My fingers froze over the keyboard. Did he just compare me to his toxic ex? Was this some twisted attempt to bond? Or was it a warning? Either way, I wasn't going to let him get inside my head. Still, his words lingered there, gnawing at me like termites eating away at wood. Things escalated quickly after that. Over the next few days, Evan started borrowing more than just pens. My headphones disappeared one afternoon, only to reappear on his desk the following day. A notebook I used for brainstorming ideas mysteriously ended up in his hands during a meeting. Each time he offered the same nonchalant apology. "Oh, sorry, I thought you weren't using it." But the worst part wasn't the borrowed items, it was the way he acted as though these invasions were normal. As if my belongings were communal property, free for the taking. It made me feel violated, like he was slowly encroaching on my personal space without permission. One particularly frustrating morning I snapped. "Evan," I said sharply, turning to face him, "if you need something, ask. Don't just take it." He blinked, feigning surprise. "Take what?" "My stuff," I replied, gesturing toward the pile of items scattered across his desk. "My pen, my headphones, my notebook. They're mine. Not yours." His expression softened, almost mockingly so. "Relax, Lila. It's just office supplies. No harm done, right? No harm done." The phrase echoed in my mind, taunting me. To him it might have been trivial, but to me it was everything. Every unreturned item was a reminder that my boundaries meant nothing to him. That I was nothing to him. That evening, as I sat alone in my car, staring at the rain-soaked windshield, I couldn't shake the feeling that Evan was testing me, pushing me, seeing how far he could go before I cracked. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. At first, Evan's interference in my work seemed harmless enough. A casual comment here, an unsolicited suggestion there. But soon, those small intrusions morphed into something far more sinister. One afternoon, I noticed changes to a document I'd been working on for days. Entire sections had been rewritten, and comments were added in bold red font. My heart sank as I scrolled through the edits. None of them were mine. And then I saw it. Evan's name in the revision history. He'd gone into my files without asking and altered my work. Just like that. As if it belonged to him. What the hell? I whispered under my breath, anger bubbling beneath the surface. This wasn't just annoying anymore, it was sabotage. Pure and simple. Before I could confront him, Maya appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was always cheerful, always ready with a kind word or a listening ear. Today, though, her smile faltered when she saw the look on my face. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting 1 cup down on my desk. I hesitated, unsure whether to confide in her. Maya was friendly, yes, but she also had a reputation for being overly diplomatic. Would she side with Evan? Or worse, dismiss my concerns as overreactions? "It's Evan," I admitted finally, lowering my voice. "He keeps crossing boundaries, borrowing my things, invading my space. And now he's messing with my work." Maya frowned, glancing over at Evan's desk. "I've heard similar stories from others," she said quietly. "Apparently, he did the same thing to Sarah last year. She ended up quitting because of it." Quitting. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Was that what Evan wanted? To drive me away until I had no choice but to leave? The situation reached its breaking point during a team meeting later that week. Our manager, Mr. Carter, called us together to discuss the progress of a major project, one I'd been leading. As I presented my findings, Evan interrupted, shaking his head dramatically. "Actually, I think there are some issues with the data," he announced, pointing out flaws that didn't exist. Flaws he'd created himself. My stomach churned as murmurs spread around the room. Everyone turned to me expectantly, waiting for an explanation. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. All I could think about was how carefully I prepared for this moment, and how easily Evan had torn it apart. Afterward, as I packed up my things to head home, Maya approached me again. "You should report him," she urged gently. "Management needs to know what's happening." Report him? The idea terrified me. What if they didn't believe me? What if Evan turned the tables and painted me as the problem? I couldn't risk it, not yet. Instead, I resolved to fight back on my own terms. I began documenting every interaction with Evan, saving screenshots of altered documents and jotting down notes about his behavior. If I couldn't stop him outright, I'd at least have proof when the time came. But even as I worked late into the night, gathering evidence, doubt crept in. Was I strong enough to stand up to him? Or would I crumble under the weight of his manipulations? Evan's tactics evolved overnight. Gone were the subtle jabs and passive-aggressive remarks. In their place came calculated attacks designed to undermine me completely. It started with an email, a seemingly innocent message sent to the entire department titled, "Thoughts on Improving Team Collaboration." At first glance, it appeared benign, but as I read through the content, my blood ran cold. Evan had listed several examples of poor teamwork, citing anonymous sources who claimed certain employees struggled to meet deadlines or communicate effectively. While he never mentioned my name explicitly, the implications were crystal clear. Everyone knew who he was talking about. Panic surged through me. How could he do this? And why now? Was it retaliation for my growing resistance? Or was this simply the next phase of his game? Determined not to let him win, I confronted him directly. What was that email about? I demanded, cornering him near the water cooler. He blinked innocently, pretending confusion. What email? You know exactly which one. I shot back, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. The one where you threw me under the bus without even mentioning my name. His lips curled into a smug smile. I was just offering constructive feedback, Lila. If you're struggling, maybe you should consider stepping back from leadership roles. Stepping back? The audacity of his words left me speechless. Here I was, busting my ass day in and day out, only for him to suggest I wasn't capable of handling responsibility. I wanted to scream, to slap that smug grin off his face. But instead, I forced myself to walk away, biting my tongue until it bled. Later that day, Maya pulled me aside. Her expression was grim as she handed me a folder filled with printed emails. These are from previous coworkers, she explained softly. They confirm what I told you before. Evan has a history of targeting people he perceives as threats. Once he zeroes in, he doesn't stop until they're gone. Flipping through the pages, I felt sick. There were testimonials from former employees detailing how Evan had systematically dismantled their careers, piece by piece. Some had transferred departments. Others had quit altogether. None of them stayed long enough to fight back. For the first time since this nightmare began, I questioned whether I could survive it. Evan wasn't just a nuisance, he was a predator. And I was his prey. Just when I thought I couldn't handle anymore, someone unexpected stepped in. Noah. Unlike Evan, Noah was quiet, almost invisible. He rarely spoke during meetings and kept to himself most days. But somehow he always seemed to notice things others missed. One evening, as I stayed late to finish a report, he approached my desk carrying 2 cups of tea. Mind if I join you? He asked, his voice soft but steady. I hesitated, unsure of his intentions. But something about his calm demeanor put me at ease. Sure, I replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. We talked for hours about work, about life, and eventually about Evan. To my surprise, Noah already knew about Evan's reputation. He thrives on chaos, Noah explained. But the key is to stay calm. Don't give him the reaction he wants. Together we devised a strategy. I would continue documenting his behavior, but this time I'd involve HR discreetly. Meanwhile, Noah promised to keep an eye on Evan, ensuring he didn't escalate further. The plan gave me a sliver of hope, or so I thought. Because the very next day, Evan struck again. During a department-wide presentation, he publicly criticized my work, accusing me of negligence and incompetence. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. My cheeks burned with shame, but I refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. Evan might control the storm, but I controlled how I weathered it. Like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Battered but unbroken, I vowed to endure. For myself. For my dignity. For freedom. I thought I'd seen the worst of Evan's manipulations. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during the quarterly review meeting. A gathering where every employee was expected to present updates on their projects. The room buzzed with anticipation as Mr. Carter called the session to order. When it was my turn, I stood confidently, ready to share the progress I'd made on the project I'd been leading. But before I could even finish my introduction, Evan interrupted. His voice rang out across the room, dripping with false concern. Actually, I think we need to address some issues here, he said, leaning forward in his chair. Lila has consistently missed deadlines and ignored feedback from her teammates. Gasps rippled through the audience. My heart pounded in my chest as all eyes turned to me waiting for a response. For a moment I froze, stunned by the audacity of his lies. But then something inside me snapped. "That's not true," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Evan has been interfering with my work for weeks, altering documents without permission and spreading misinformation about my performance." I pulled out a folder filled with screenshots, emails, and notes documenting his behavior. "Here's proof." The room fell silent as I handed the evidence to Mr. Carter. Evan's face turned pale, but he quickly recovered, attempting to deflect. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed. "She's just trying to cover up her mistakes." But this time I didn't back down. "If that's true, then why did you send an email criticizing my leadership skills without ever speaking to me directly? Or change data in my reports to make them look inaccurate?" The air grew thick with tension as Mr. Carter reviewed the documents. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Both of you will submit detailed reports about these allegations by tomorrow morning. Until then, I expect professionalism from everyone." As the meeting adjourned, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because I'd finally stood up for myself. Dread because I knew Evan wouldn't go down without a fight. By noon the next day, the truth began to unravel. Mr. Carter called me into his office, his expression unreadable. "Your report was thorough and well supported," he said after a long pause. "And unfortunately, Evan's explanations don't hold up." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Moments later, Maya rushed into the break room, her face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe this," she whispered, pulling me aside. "An ex-colleague of Evan's emailed HR last night. They confirmed everything you've been saying, and more." Apparently, Evan had left his previous job under questionable circumstances. According to the email, he'd been accused of similar behavior there: manipulating coworkers, sabotaging projects, and creating toxic environments. When confronted, he denied everything and walked away unscathed. Until now. That afternoon, Evan was summoned to another meeting with HR. This time, he didn't emerge victorious. Instead, he was placed on temporary suspension pending further investigation. As word spread throughout the office, whispers followed him like shadows. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe justice really was possible. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I couldn't shake the lingering weight of everything Evan had put me through. Healing wouldn't come overnight. In the days following Evan's suspension, life at the office slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could get. Without his constant interference, I found it easier to focus on my work. Yet the scars remained. Every time someone borrowed a pen or asked for help, I flinched, half expecting another betrayal. Noah noticed my unease and approached me one evening as I packed up to leave. "You've been through a lot," he said gently. "Maybe it's time to talk to someone who can help you process everything." At first, I resisted the idea. Therapy seemed unnecessary, almost indulgent. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I needed support. Not just from friends, but from professionals trained to guide people through trauma. Around the same time, I decided to request a transfer within the company. Staying in the same workspace as Evan, even if only temporarily, felt suffocating. I wanted a fresh start, somewhere I could rebuild my confidence and establish healthier boundaries. One crisp spring morning, as I walked into my new department, I felt like a tree stretching its branches toward sunlight after years of living in shadow. The world wasn't perfect, but for the first time in ages, I believed I could thrive again. Weeks passed, and the investigation into Evan's conduct reached its conclusion. Months later, I received an offer from a tech startup based in Portland. It was a chance to lead a team to build something meaningful from scratch. Though leaving Eugene meant saying goodbye to familiar faces, I knew it was the right decision. On my first day at the new office, I stood outside the glass doors, taking a deep breath. The city skyline stretched beyond, vibrant and alive. For so long, I'd let fear dictate my choices, allowing others to define my limits. Not anymore. I finally decided to walk away. I whispered to myself, smiling softly, and it feels like the first step toward freedom. Inside, the hum of activity greeted me, an orchestra of possibilities. As I stepped forward, I carried with me lessons learned, scars healed, and a renewed belief in my own strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready. Because sometimes walking away isn't running, it's reclaiming your power. And for the first time in years, I felt truly unstoppable.